How's it going? My name is Travis Mortz. We're here for another episode of Vintage Camera Review. Today we're going to be looking at the Rolleiflex twin lens reflex camera, and we're going to be talking about some of the differences between the various models and what to look for. So for those of you out there who are actually vintage camera collectors just like I am, we're all familiar with what these cases are. These are clearly Rolleiflex ever-ready cases, and whenever I find a case like this, I always get really excited because I never know what's going to be on the inside. As far as which Rolleiflex it really will be, it could always be a Rolleicord, which is equally as exciting but not quite as valuable. So we're going to open these up and take a look and see what we've got inside. Um, so to start off, this is a Rolleiflex with a really nice case. We got the built-in strap, and who knows what's going to be inside there. We're going to open it up and find out. So here we have a Rolleiflex 3.5 MX. This camera has a Schneider cruise notch lens, and this is your standard Rollie. This is the Rolleiflex. The basic everyday kind of guy would have this Rolleiflex. Let's see what we've got in this one. And the excitement of opening up these leather cases when you find them out in the wild, if you will, is it's just that. It's very exciting, and mostly because whenever I find a Rolleiflex case, I'm always eager to see what camera is going to be on the inside. Mostly, this is what I would be looking for. This is a Rolleiflex 2.8D. This has a Carl Zeiss planar lens, and this would have been the king of all kings. The 2.8F is really the king of all kings, but as far as Rolleiflexes go, the 2.8 Rolleiflex is the very highly revered version, the one that everybody's out there looking for. And although it's only just a little bit faster than this one, it is much more desirable and monetarily more expensive. So this is the 2.8D. This one has no built-in light meter. This just is straightforward shutter speed and aperture. We're going to go through that a little bit further, and we'll go through both these cameras and see what the major differences are and see exactly what Rolleiflex would be good for you. So what we have here is a Rolleiflex 3.5 with a Schneider cruise notch lens, and this is actually the automat version, which specified that it had an automatic counter. And what this camera actually does when you load it is it measures the film's backing thickness and knows when to start counting the frames. So here's the inside of the Rollie. You can see that there's a big square opening for the image here, and it's pretty straightforward aside from that. Just a few features of this camera. That's how you close the bottom. So we've got our focusing knob over here, and as you see, it's actually got our distances, and it also has a depth of field guide here, so you can see if you're focused at 10 feet at f8, your depth of field will effectively be from 8 feet to 12 feet. So that's pretty handy. You see the nice made in Germany right there. Some features about this camera are this has a shutter lock button, or shutter lock crank arm, if you will, as well as a X-Sync switch for electronic flash. Additionally, this camera's shutter speeds are much like any other Rollie or even like a Yashica twin lens. You've got your shutter speed here and you've got your apertures here. And this is really handy when you're shooting because you could be composing a shot and changing your shutter speed and aperture simultaneously. The hood of this one's actually a little bit beat up, so I'm going to wait to show you guys some of the things that this viewfinder will do with my other camera. So this would have been the very standard 3.5 version. These could be had for anywhere, from $300 to $450. It's a great introduction to the Rolleiflex camera because it gets you used to the camera itself, gets you used to using this type of camera, and it'll help you decide if you really do want to make the purchase and spend a little more money on the 2.8 version or the 2.8F with the built-in meter. This camera also, this is very typical of Rolleiflexes. They have a exposure guide on the back for those non-light meter guys out there like me. You could just look at this thing and it'll tell you all your situations and what exposures to shoot it at. So that's really great about this camera. Is it's very user friendly and it's pretty much the total package as far as twin lens cameras go. You know, it does everything. So we're going to move on to the 2.8 now. I can show you some of the differences. So here we have both cameras side by side. You can see that both of them are very similar, but they do have some differences. As you can see, they both have the Frankenheidt deck on the bottom. That's the company that makes Rolleiflex. And some of the subtle differences are going to be our flash sync lever here. Switch it over to X for electronic flash. We've got our PC, which actually has a locking mechanism in it, which is very nice, as you can see, with the two bars there that hold onto your PC cable. In addition, there's these EV ratings here that we've got, and you know, on older meters, our older meters would measure in exposure value, so you could just set your EV. And one of the beautiful things about this camera is if you turn this lever here, I don't know what to call it, that's actually going to sync up your shutter speed and your aperture for equivalent exposure. So you see I'm only turning one knob and they're both going simultaneously. So one of the huge benefits of that is being able to set your exposure based on your EV value, and you could, you know, change your shutter speed throughout the day without having to worry about your exposure being over or under. It's going to be equivalent. In addition, we've got our shutter lock here, which is a little bit different than the 3.5, more integrated and built in. We'll go over to this side. On this side of the camera, we've got the ISO. Oh, how do we turn that? Let's see here. I don't ever turn this thing. So we've got our ISO. Yeah, it is like that. So we can change our setting just for point of reference so we know what kind of film is in there. In addition, we've got this little thing on the inside, which, let's see, I don't ever mess with these things if I'm totally honest. So there we go. You could also change this to see what kind of film. It looks like you turn it counterclockwise to change the film type and clockwise to change the ISO. See, I just figured that out because I don't hardly ever play with that. In addition, we've also got the depth of field guide, just like we did on the other Rollie, but it goes all the way to f22, and as you can see, it's a little more elaborate than the 3.5. And this is a really interesting feature about this camera. This is a 36 exposure counter because this camera actually has a kit that will accept 35mm film into it. God forbid you ever put 35mm film in here, but you could if you're really feeling that crazy. So we'll open up the camera. Something that's really useful to know, and it's something that all Rollie users know, but for those of you out there who have not bought one yet and maybe intend to buy one after this video, this roller here, that is the #1 problem when I'm loading a Rolleiflex, is forgetting to put my leader underneath that. So always remember when you're loading film into this camera, and I'll demonstrate, you want to put your film underneath that roller, because that is the roller that measures the film's width and starts counting. Otherwise, you're just going to crank through a whole roll of film and not shoot any pictures on it. Believe me, I've had it happen to me, and it's tragic. So I'm going to close this up, and we're going to go into some of the features of the Viewfinder now. So now I'd like to talk about this finder here, this waist level finder. Although it looks rather simple, this is one of the more intricate finders as far as TLR cameras go. And it even took me a few years to really fully understand what the purposes were for it and in what situation to use it. So I'd like to go through that a little bit. So here we go. We've got our regular waist level finder, just like any other camera. And if you look inside, we've got this little silver tab here. So if we flip that silver tab up, it's going to bring our magnifying glass. And what that could do is, you can magnify your finder beautifully. Now, that's pretty basic, pretty standard. But what you'll notice is on the inside of this hood, there's a mirror. And that mirror is the very interesting part about this. If you push down right here, and you push it forward, it'll actually lock there. Now, what that does, you're probably wondering, what that does is actually drops a mirror down into this eyepiece. And what that means for you is that you could look through that eyepiece, and let's see if it'll focus on it. You look through that eyepiece, and what it'll do is you can see half the ground glass. So you would focus through this eyepiece on your subject. Here, I'll focus on the phone. And once I've decided that my focus is set, because I can see my ground glass and I know that my focus is set, you can look through this small square hole right here. And this is actually what your sport finder is. So if you're shooting some high-speed stuff that you can't keep up with focus, and you can't, being that the Rolleiflex is a twin lens camera, everything is backwards laterally. So by using this feature on the camera, you could focus beforehand, and then you could look through this sports finder, and that's going to give you a point of reference as to what is in the frame. And it looks like about this area, my phone, and some of the stuff in my corner. And it's a great way of framing up shots if you just feel like doing something a little differently. I could personally say I haven't found much use for it as far as being necessary, but it being an added feature is certainly nice, and it makes you appreciate the camera a little bit more because of how intricate this really is. And just to close that, all you got to do is press down on this, and that's gonna. I mean, it's just so wonderful, the fact that this is 60-something years old and does this. So close it all up, back to business, and put it back in your case.
Now, I've just recently purchased this camera, actually, the 3.5. So I'm going to take the opportunity and load up some film, and I figure it's a good time to show you guys how to do this as well. Because like I said, when I got my first Rolleiflex, it was also a 3.5. And I loaded about 3 rolls of film until I decided that I was going to quit being stubborn and look up online how to do it. So I'm going to try to save you guys some of the trouble. So here we go. We're going to turn this little lever here. That's going to release the film back. Pop it open. We got to take up spool here. I don't want to pop that out. Put it in the top part. Please excuse me, I'm looking through my phone while doing this. We're going to take our roll, Fuji Acros. Great film, by the way. Fuji Neopan Acros. So, we're going to put it face down, obviously. Stick our film in here. Bada bing. And like I said, this roller here, this is the ever so important roller. It's the first one, not the second one. And you just have to really make sure that you put your film underneath that, because that's what measures how much film's going through the camera, and that's how our camera's going to work correctly. So, I'm going to guide it in here. There's a funky spool that I've got. Now, a guy once told me that the Rolleiflex always knows where the first frame is, so you can close it whenever you want. Now, I usually like to start when I see the arrow, is when I'll close it. Close this up. And then, see, as you can see, we're on 0 here. So you just crank it. And the camera's going to know where the first frame is. There we go. We're on the first frame. And to shoot the Rolleiflex, you actually have to put this crank back in its home here. And then the camera is ready to fire. So there we go. We've loaded our Rolleiflex now. Good to go.
Well, guys, that about sums it up for this review. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave any comments in the below section if you have any requests of different cameras I can review. And until next time, happy shooting.